vaccinated, as well as all of our panelists today. So we felt comfortable to come together and knowing the gravity of what we're discussing today. And having this safe space, a very vulnerable space to share a little bit about what we're experiencing. So thank you to our Tempo members. Thank you to our emerging women leaders for joining in today's discussion. We will break out into rooms a little bit later. But for those of you new to Tempo or emerging women leaders, I'm Jen Dirks, President and CEO of Tempo, and a little bit of background about Tempo Real Talks. So we started Tempo Real Talks about a year ago in April when everything around us was imploding and we needed to react and respond to what we were seeing and what we were witnessing, not only in our backyard, but in our country and following the horrific murder of George Floyd. We knew that Tempo needed to have a space. We had a voice and a strong voice in this community to change that narrative. And so we started and launched our Tempo Real Talks and invited our members to just show up. We didn't have an agenda. Many of you were there. We talked about what you're hearing, what you're feeling, and share your experiences in a very vulnerable, transparent, and open dialogue, and some uncomfortable conversations. But we knew the response from that first launch, we carried this through, and it brings us here today, and even greater understanding with today's recognition and our session today. So before we launch into the Day of Understanding, I do want to acknowledge and thank US Bank, and specifically Alicia Lance for her work with our Tempo Real Talks. So I'm going to toss it over to her and talk a little bit about her commitment to Tempo's Real Talks. Alicia.
Thank you, Jen. US Bank Wealth Management is really excited to be sponsoring the Tempo Real Talk session. We really feel just showing up is so important, and how we show up as a company is important for us at US Bank. Our CEO, Andy Cecere, signed the CEO Action Pledge, and we recently launched a new program to build wealth and create access for diverse communities called US Bank Access Commitment, which focuses on three primary areas: supporting businesses owned by people of color, helping individuals and communities of color advance economically, and enhancing career opportunities for employees and prospective employees. Access Commitment is a long-term approach led by diversity, equity, and inclusion that brings together all of our business lines and corporate support functions in an effort to build wealth for and redefine how we serve diverse communities and provides more opportunities for diverse employees. We believe access to capital for minority small business, housing, homeownership, and workforce advancement creates opportunities for systemic change. So thank you. And Jen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you, US Bank, for your commitment to our Tempo Real Talks. And thank you again to our Tempo members and our emerging women leaders. So let's begin today's discussion. So I want to first, before we give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, I want to start with you, Erica Joy Daniels. So for those of you who know Erica Joy or maybe don't know Erica Joy Daniels, I want to extend our thanks and gratefulness for your leadership. You have been instrumental in helping Tempo on our journey on diversity, equity, and inclusion. She has led our D&I committee, and she has introduced us to collaborations and partnerships that we need to be a part of, which is when you introduced us to the CEO Action Diversity and Inclusion Pledge, which is kind of behind the whole Day of Understanding. So talk a little bit about that movement, and then we can have everybody else introduce themselves.
Excellent. Yeah. So I'm so excited to be a part of Tempo for a few reasons. The membership brings me connection, and the leadership gives me platform for purpose. And that excites me. The openness for us to engage and understand partnerships like Jen talked about. So PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, created this pledge called the CEO Action Pledge. And it's named that intentionally because it's not just about the organization, but it's about the leader at the helm making a declarative statement and being intentional around wanting to advance diversity, equity, inclusion. When I brought that to Jen, she was like, "You got me." I was like, "I hadn't got through my full pitch yet. Like, I'm on paragraph 2.
We have to be part of this.
Right. And so that readiness to me was such a strong demonstration of what it takes for us to really drive. the great thing about PwC is it comes with resources and connections and other ways to collaborate and learn best practices. They've devised this approach called the Month of Understanding. They started with the Day of Understanding and recognized that people wanted more than just a day to be available. So all of April has been tagged as the Month of Understanding, where you take information, education, toolkits, resources, and do what we're doing, having candid conversation to just understand each other, not debate, not fight, not arm wrestle, but just understand each other. Because imagine how far we can get when we can actually understand our neighbor. So we're proud to say that we got it. And because the skills, passion, and insight in this group, kind of writing our own script here, which we think is more powerful. All the production in this day is just the technology. What's not produced is our passion. And so we're really excited to be able to dive into some conversation and understand each other. And we also will give a chance to make that happen for you too. We just asked you to show up. So you're showing up here in this moment, and we're also going to ask you to show up in these breakout rooms, where there will be the ripple effect of a safe space to explore, understand, and let's grow together. Sound good?
Yeah, perfect.
Love
Awesome. Great setup.
Yeah. So who are we? Like, who's understanding each other, right? Let's start at the West Side.
All right. So hi, everyone. I'm Alia Pitts. In my day job, I'm the Chief Advancement Officer at the Prairie School. So my job is all about relationship building, right? Authentic relationship building, which I think has led to my passion for inclusion. I want everyone to get a seat at the table. And a big part of my job is figuring out whose voice is not being heard and how can I invite them to pull up a chair. So, you know, we get to know people in our, you know, on my team and in our school, but we also tell a lot of stories. So the flip side of that is, whose story are we telling? And I have been super fortunate to work with and under Erica Joy at Tempo and learn a ton, and I still have tons to learn, but I've been really engaged in the D&I committee, and so Tempo has given me a platform not only to speak, but to learn, and so I'm really grateful for that, right? I don't have all the answers, but I feel like I can just show up and ask a lot of questions, so excited to be here.
That's cool.
Awesome. Sam Maldonado. I work at Kohl's as a senior manager in diversity and inclusion. So this is my happy space. This is more like a lived experience for me, right? This isn't anything of a new domain that I'm just entering into as a job, but this is literally what I live every day. And so finding ways to bring people to the table, to have that representation, to share that voice, and to learn through my experiences and have them reflect on their own, to then take that next step in that journey, to then be that catalyst for growth in many other areas. That's my jam. That's what fuels me. And so I found my way within diversity, equity, inclusion, not necessarily just in a formalized role, but in different avenues through my children, through my community work, through consulting and coaching. So this is just another opportunity for me to continue to share my learnings and to learn from other leaders in this space through their own experiences and how they're taking it forward so that we can all move forward together.
Excellent. Joanne.
I'm Joanne Sabir, and it's really a sincere honor to be here with all of you. I'm new to this work, to this group. But really what I've found is it feels like a warm hug, you know, and more I want to be in authentic spaces with real, wonderful, committed people. We started with this language of purpose.
Yeah.
So when I think about anything that I endeavor to do, it has to be committed to purpose and to impacting the greater good. So we are the greater good. And so being here today is a part of the legacy of my life's work, is really creating pathways of opportunity. And so I'm a serial entrepreneur and I'm an advisor with American Family, but really my life's passion is creating strategic connections that impact real impact in community. And so let's get it. Let's talk.
Oh my God. It's like I want to rip off of everything that everybody's saying. Because the cool thing is, it is about relationships, you know?
Totally.
I am so blessed that this isn't a stranger panel to me. Like, I know each of you in such like distinct ways. And I'm gonna Sam. Okay. So I've known you like over a decade, right?
Yeah.
And I think it is about not just jobs, but you talked about teaching, right? And the power of stories. I think storytelling helps us engage. Are you guys up for just some story sharing?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you share a story? Like, if we're understand this thing called difference and valuing difference and what it means to like open our eyes up to new perspectives. Personal experience that any of you all have had where you felt like that raised my awareness, and if I'm transparent enough, it might help somebody else.
Yeah, so in preparation for this session, actually, I shared with the group a pretty vulnerable experience that I had a few years ago in suburban America, right? And we live in a pretty homogeneous suburb, right? All the garages are connected to the houses, so there's not a lot of, integration with, there's like the head nod or the hello as you're walking, but not really, hey, let me give you a casserole and welcome you to the neighborhood. None of that. That's like, I'm like, does that actually happen? But I say all that to say in that there really wasn't ever any engagement. There wasn't the conversation. There wasn't the welcoming to the neighborhood. And then a few years in, because we have a dog and she would be out and, we live in a corner lot. So people would walk by, she would bark. That's, pretty expectational for a dog. But then we ended up getting an anonymous hate letter that was super, how would you say, hurtful, right? And the central gist of the letter was, don't make our neighborhood into your ghetto, right? And it had like the 30,000 exclamation points, like 40-point font, and of course it was just in an envelope in our mailbox. And so of course I have no idea who sent it. And I'm like, wait a minute. I think at one point they also referenced my kids and my family. I'm like, Mama Bear comes on at that point, right? No. I'm like, it's like I was about to knock on all the doors and my husband's like, wait a minute. Let's think about this for a second. But then we ended up composing ourselves, right? Because we don't want to do anything and just react. We want to think more thoughtfully about how do we create some understanding? How do we try to understand and have them understand who we are versus them just making a judgment based on what they see. And also, I have mixed family. My dad's is from Milwaukee, German Polish. My mom's from Peru. My in-laws are from Mexico and they're a little darker complected. So you can see a mix of people at my house. And then if we have different workers or anybody coming over, it's going to be, the new modern family. But then, so we wrote a letter and we didn't know who sent it. So we went around in the radius of our house and printed off essentially like 20 letters and put them in all the mailboxes. And of course, you're going to get a myriad of responses. Like, oh, I'm so sorry this happened to you. Welcome. Others on the defensive. Like, why am I getting this? Like, how do you not understand? Like, this is something that happened to me and my family that's concerning, that I don't feel welcome in my own neighborhood. And so we never found out who wrote it. But I say all of that to say that there's still a sense of paranoia. Like I don't want to leave my dog out, even though she doesn't bark. I worry that something could happen to her because again, we have an exposed corner lot. And I worry about my kids, like them being outside and not necessarily being welcomed or feeling safe. So it can happen anywhere and everywhere to anyone. And it's a matter of how you choose to respond and try to create those connections. And some good things happened with it. Like we did actually spark up some conversations with others in the neighborhood based on a potentially really traumatic experience. So
yeah. When you think about that and the things that we experienced, when you shared that with us, that's like pretty recent, right? Like think about all the things that are happening. We can look at the chronicle of last year, but it didn't take long. It's just within a week.
Yes.
Yeah.
This week.
Sunday.
Yeah.
So where are you guys right
things.
now? Like
Multiple things.
where's your mind? Like where are you right now?
It's a balance for me. It's a balance because I have to have critical conversations with my children, with my Black son, who I had to buy a car. And I didn't think about necessarily safety. I was like, I don't want it to be too flat. I need a car that can be unassuming. And so all of these things that we have to process through. And I kind of don't give him the space. He can't afford the space just to be innocent, just to be a 17-year-old who gets to have a conversation about a car. We didn't talk about gas mileage, all of these things. And so it's heavy. So really, and it's kind of, every moment it's re-traumatizing because you look at these cases and you say, this could be my son. This is my son. These are our children. So how do we create a lived experience that affords us joy in this reality, but allows us to be kind of effective as it relates to impacting some critical changes that need to happen in our world?
Yeah. And when you were watching one, you've got stewardship over how many kids, Alia?
600.
Yeah.
And many of our families come from Kenosha, which this summer, was the site of the shooting of Jacob Blake.
Yeah.
And just today it came out that that officer is now back on the job
Really?
as of this week. And so, I think about, God, Joanne, I want to hold your son, right? I want to hold our Kenosha families who's.
It's so important because when you say I have one, I have many.
Yeah.
And the
Right.
more that we think that way,
That's true.
that these are all of our babies.
Right.
Yes.
So
Right.
Just when I'm thinking of my son, I'm thinking of our nation,
Yeah.
right? And so I don't just think in reference to this kind of in my home.
Yeah,
I think
that's
of our
true.
Right.
children. These are our
Totally true.
babies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yep.
But we bear that collective responsibility, right? This isn't just like your problem or your problem. It is our problem. And I think my challenge is, how can I show up and be there in a way that does not re-traumatize someone, and ask them, okay, can you explain your experience to me again? Because you know what? That is not, I don't
No.
think,
Yeah.
helpful.
It just
Yeah.
brings it back
No.
up again.
Right, like, okay, we're gonna go through this one more time, because every time this is in the news, I think, oh my God, like the air just goes out.
Yeah.
And so, right, so you're creating a place where those who are affected, feel protected and safe, but you also want other people to be able to show up and to coach, especially kids. How do you show up for your friends? How do you show up for your community? How do you show up for your family? And, also grownups. I mean, I think, we're all doing this work. So, I think that's where my head's at, right? You just want to show up without putting the burden on somebody else.
Well, what are your thoughts around teaching what you know to your peers? So there's something about carrying the water, right?
Mhm.
So that protects me from having to be the person that
Yeah.
kind of reiterates is responsible for informing. So just
Right.
wondering, it feels so good to be
Yeah.
with allies and folks that
Yeah.
are committed to carrying the water.
Right.
But it's interesting because we've had this conversation about, I oftentimes feel overwhelmed in the education piece, because how much I'm still on a journey myself and educating myself. But then as the leader of an organization, I want to educate our members. But I think you and I talked when we started out, we had great results for that first day of our Temple Real Talks and people just showing up. And Zoom fatigue or what have you, it's kind of dwindled. And we have a membership base of 800 women that need to be a part of this conversation. But you said it's not on you to educate them. We need to meet them where they are and bring them into the conversation. So at times I'm overwhelmed, and then I'm like, it's heavy. You turn on the news and I don't want to see this anymore. But at the same time, you opened it up. This is a purpose that we have. We are showing up collectively here. That gives me optimism and hope that we are a small but mighty voice here in Milwaukee. So I'm on a roller coaster.
I think that the work that you all have done has made it real. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a big forum. It's conversation, it's dinner, it's how are you, I'm checking in. What does your dinner table look like when we are able to get back together? How do we indoctrinate real living versus creating experiences to have conversations? What you've done here is created a platform for us to now take it home. I'm going to take it home. I'm going to take it whenever I can get back out and have coffee. Call me. I'm
She's vaccinated.
Right.
But
We're all
those
having
are
our
risks
first
that we have to take, though.
Yeah.
We tease and say, this is a safe place. One, because we're vaccinated.
Right.
Two, because we've established grace and permission for us to be vulnerable with each other.
Yeah.
That doesn't always happen.
Right.
That doesn't always happen. And because we've got to be so buttoned up, and we've got to be hold it together. And we say bring your full self to work, but we don't really mean it.
Right.
Like
We're
leave
judging
your
you.
trouble. Right.
Too messy to bring your.
So where do you go? You spend most of your day at work, but then you've got to contain pieces of you.
Filter it out.
And then you get home and you're like, and I want to go back to something you said, Jen, because remember someone last year asked me like, well, what are you worried about? Or what are your anxieties as we go through all this diversity stuff? And I said, I just hope it doesn't become a firework.
Yes.
Like
Agreed.
Performative.
yes.
The next thing to do.
And people are getting tired of hearing, tired of, but I want to like tell some people, guess what? Well, I'm tired of the lived experience I have.
Right.
Let me tell you what I'm
Tell me
tired. I'm tired of getting pulled over.
Yeah.
I'm tired of living in Mequon and having to explain my license. I can only be real, guys. Like I'm tired too. So, but then again, it doesn't have to be at all. It's just who's enough.
Right.
Who's enough for the conversation, you know? And so let me ask you this too, because how do we balance that fatigue of the burden and the energy that we need to still do what we have to do? Like, what fuels you all?
This.
Yeah, I was gonna just say,
Yes.
it's these conversations,
Yeah,
being able to
right.
hug friends that you haven't seen, like it's that transference of energy. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
And so for me, being able to have those conversations where they can call you to the table and be honest with you and vice versa. They're like, Sam, take a pause, right? And be honest. And that's what you need.
Right.
And so then that fills your cup and you can like, I can take on another day, right? But it's that willingness to receive it as well, not always have to carry and be on for everyone,
Yeah.
but do so when you can and also receive when others can pour into you, I think is the best way. So it's relationships that you can trust in without a question of agenda, that there's a sense of breath that you can when you have those friendships and those relationships that you can trust.
Yeah.
And that's what helps me get through.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ali, you talked about it too. I mean, you're in the business of developing relationships. And so, you know, I encourage people and our members to look beyond those typical relationships and develop those outside of your network and invite a woman of color, you know, or somebody that is, outside of that comfort network, and have these dialogues with them and open that conversation, be vulnerable with one another. That's how we've developed these relationships, right?
It's so critical.
I want to plug a tempo thing.
No,
Sorry.
don't be shy.
Yeah.
Plug here.
And now a commercial.
Shameful plug.
No, but
Have at it.
I have met people through the Coffee Connections program. And that to me has been so meaningful, even though all of mine have been over Zoom so far. But I think at an in-person meeting, I'd be like, ooh, I know you. I want to see the people I know and like catch up with my friends. And it has allowed me to meet people totally outside of my industry, interest areas. But you're sitting there like this, you have this meaningful connection. So, I mean, kudos to you guys for coming up with that, because that's been awesome for me. So, but, you know, and piggybacking off of this, I think we all chose to be here today, right? You talked about people who fill your cup and like vice versa. To me, the pandemic has taught me how to intentionally use my time. And so when I feel overwhelmed, I'm trying to think about, okay, instead of like doom scrolling the internet and reading one more meme about
That's the best term.
Stop doom scrolling.
But isn't that what you do? You're just like,
Oh my God.
Right. And you know it's happening.
Yeah.
I can't, you can't put it down. So I had some really frank talks with my spouse about how we were going to use our time to do
That's good.
versus, and I need to consume news because I want to be informed, but like you can only consume so much news, and then it's the same thing over and over. So I think to me it's the intentional use of time, like to be with the people who fill your cup and to do the things, even if they're small steps, right? Like what am I doing to put my money where my mouth is?
Right.
So let me ask you this. I don't want to keep us down, but I want to acknowledge two tough words that I want to get through, because these are the words that we have to deal with, that those solutions help us with: trauma and mental health. Okay. So we're all willing to hang up our super capes, right? All the credentials that got us into Tempo, all the amazingness, all the news articles and business. Can we pause those real quick? Just time out for all the, and be real, like trauma. Like if somebody could talk about what do we mean by trauma? How does it relate to difference? And then let's get to how does all of that we're seeing, witnessing, doom scrolling through affect our mental health?
Yeah, I think, I'm a supreme mental health advocate, and even more so, in this time that we live in. And I think it's an important conversation, one, to hold it, to acknowledge it, not to just, that they say that the strong, really Black woman is sick and dead and has had a heart attack. So like, how do you let that go? How do you let that go? How do you an agreement with yourself to let go of what doesn't serve you? So when you talk about this doom scrolling, how do you let that go? How do you set boundaries that allow to take a breath, a moment, because sometimes this lived experience is enough versus being re-traumatized when you're. But what are your mental health needs? Where, like they say, hope floats. Where's hope? Where can you hold on to hope and stay afloat? And what does that look like? What are your personal, when I talk about joy and I talk about personal care, it doesn't necessarily mean a massage or a nail. It means that for me. But it might mean something, it might mean a little something different for y'all. But I just want to
That's
say,
filling your cup.
you know, my cup looks like, you know, watching a Marvel movie on Disney with my kids. So what does it look like that it's immutable? That it is your line in the sand, that this is your time and your space. And I acknowledge that that is a supreme gift to be able to make those definitions in life. But if you have the ability to do that even in a small way, find joy and be joy. When you walk in the room, give somebody some love. You know, that's a challenge.
Right.
Because it's hard, it's thick, it's mud.
Yeah.
But mental health, and we have some amazing mental health practitioners. I mean, really, I'm not just talking about things that may feel a little woo-woo. I meditate, I light candles, I'm burning. What my daughter's in a room, it's smoky. Too much incense. Too much. But really thinking about the need to have a conversation with somebody else.
Yep, who can help you process through it. And you know, I love how you said like the boundaries. I've been thinking about like, how do we redefine some of this? You know, somebody asked me the other day, you know, Erica Joy, is there light at the end of the tunnel? I'm like, okay, I can't give you any help on COVID, right? I wish in healthcare that I had the calculator that said, it shall all end this date.
Add a pool to it.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Get some money on that.
And I thought about it, I'm like, it took me back to a panel I was on like some years ago, somewhere here in the city for somebody. And they were asking, you know, can women have it all? And the panel was like, no. And I'm like, I'm gonna be the last female on this. I'm like, I believe you can.
Yes.
I think you have to redefine your all.
Right.
So when they asked me this question, it took me back to that panel. And I'm like, I need to redefine my tunnel and I need to redefine my light. And I don't have to wait for the light to be at the end of the tunnel.
The light is now.
How about we spark some stuff?
Yeah.
How about I strap myself out in my daily journey with whatever matches or candle I need, that I don't have to wait for someone else to offer me that light. And how about I recognize what the tunnel may be if it's where I am right now? How do we do that? So how would you reimagine life?
Well, I would first think it's not an if and a when, right? Well, a lot of times like, well, if this happens or when this happens, like you're always having that clutch of that, then I'm going to be great, right? But it's again, how do you manifest what you need right now, right? And to your very point, I would snuggle on the couch watching Marvel all day, and that's my happy place with a bowl of chicken tikka, and I'm a happy mom, right? And a glass of rosé. Exactly right. Rosé, tikka, Marvel, and my phone is off, right?
Next meeting.
Exactly. Unavailable. But it's about doing some sort of a calendar if you need to, like ideal calendar, and holding that time sacred. You know, it's not a work-life balance, it's a negotiation, a prioritization of what needs to manifest as a priority today, right? And it's again, you can have it all. Is it all right now? Or is it, you know, I'm doing this now, I'm doing this now, but then again, it's like, it's this arbitrary goal that we have in our head of what this looks like, to your point, and redefining, you know, what we had thought 20 years ago is the thing, to what really needs to be now, in comparison to where our life's experiences have taken us and how we want to continue to improve and how we want to focus on our soul care. I heard that phrase a while ago. I'm like, oh my God, I'm taking it. Sorry. I'm flattery, please. But it really is, it's how do you fill your soul? It's through the massages or through the Marvel or through a book, right? And just finding the time when the house is quiet, just to give some time to recharge your brain, right? We're not always on all the time, but when do we take the time to just take a pause and reset? And that's when I do those intentional times with some friends that keep it honest and say, you know, that's kind of a reprieve for my brain too. It's when we're reading a book and how did you digest that, or your privilege is showing, or whatever it is, right? But it's
and recognizing too that it's okay to have those mental health breaks and allow us, because
beyond okay.
It's
necessary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's true.
And I think oftentimes until you recognize that and identify that we're all strong leaders and we all want to come and bring our full self, but it doesn't happen all the time. It can't happen all the time.
Right.
And so to allow yourself, whatever it is that, you know, reignites you and gets you refreshed, take that time.
Yeah.
It's so critical.
Yep.
It really is.
And we need to keep a careful eye on each other to
Yes.
do that.
Yes.
I'll never forget about maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, my grandmother had passed away. And at the same time, I was working on this big event to show Girl Rising. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie. It's an amazing film about young women all across the globe and the powerful things that they're doing. And I had to gear up because we were doing showing at UWM. So we had this ballroom, the mayor was coming, and we had buses of kids coming in, and I was prepping that week, and I had a dear friend, Jennifer Maldonado, who was checking on me that week, and she was like, "How's it going?" And I was like, and I told her, and she was like,
Jennifer, are you everybody's dear friend?
"Yes,
I
yes."
feel really special.
Yes.
You make me feel
You too, JB. I'm not even just mine.
Yeah, no, we gotta share. Jen.
We're share.
Yeah.
And she
touched
checked,
all of us.
she checked, but she would not let it go.
Yeah.
And she was like, "How are you going to do this? The event is the day of the burial. You'll make it in time, but will you be in time?"
Yeah.
Right.
And she's like, "I got it." I said, "What do you mean?" I got it. So but here's the thing, I had to let it go. I had to let it go. I had to say, "Okay, Kate, it's not necessary right now," right? And I let it go. And I went to my grandmother's burial. I went there. My husband was like, "I know you still need that because young people feel you." And I showed up. She was on stage with the mayor. I don't even remember this, but as she looked, she was like, "You good?" I was like, and delivered. And to me, the gift of eyes,
Yes.
the gift of intentional support, and the gift of making space when a sister needs it, like we can't miss that, but we have to keep our eyes on it.
And then allowing
Okay.
yourself to be open to
Yes.
receive it.
Yes.
That's been my most recent
Yeah.
aha. It's open. It's all right here. It's right here.
Right.
Because I'm the giver. I put myself in that box.
Yeah.
And so here I am, open, receiving. But it's that piece.
Yeah.
What keeps us from doing that?
This feeling we have to do it all the time.
Yep.
Pride,
Yep.
vulnerability. Nobody wants to be vulnerable.
right.
You know,
Yep.
like it's a show of weakness.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah.
no, we
But
need this.
I think women are learning, or at least I'm learning, that I don't need to lead like a man. And like, I love men, married to a man. Like, men are great. I'm not, just put that out there. He's wonderful. Love you, honey. But I can be myself, and like that's why I'm valued, right? And I think again, look at this against the backdrop of a once in a century, please, global pandemic.
Yeah.
So these conversations we're having, right? The intense trauma visited on parts of our community, and then all this is happening against a healthcare crisis that has now become part of life. That we're so excited to be here, 7 people in a room. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is not normal. This is not normal. And so I have to tell myself, because I'm used to functioning in this normal. No, it's not normal. It's not. normal.
Right.
Yeah.
And let's redefine what that is too.
Right.
People can say, "I want to go back." I'm like, I don't know that I want to go
No.
back.
Yeah.
No.
And it's even realistic. I mean,
Right.
how about not what I want to go back to, but what I want to go forward with?
Yes. What do I want to
There
take
are
with me?
people.
What do
I have
that,
teams that I'm responsible that are watching. I have a kid that's watching. I have a husband I'm responsible for. And am I going to be like, man, if I could just get back to
Right. The
Or-
if or the when, right?
those conditions?
Yeah, we've been forced to be less transactional. So it's exciting to see that we're now all called to show up a little differently.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. You know, when you talk about show up, I want to ask this too, that made me think about how do we make room and safety for those who will show up differently. I read an article that really hurt my heart about how the anxiety that some felt of, "Oh my God, I gotta be shut down." Like extroverts were like, "I gotta go places." People who are introverted, this is diversity still, right?
Right.
We're like,
Yeah.
I'm relieved. Like I'm
I
good. I get to go
I
home.
can breathe.
And reopening creates stress
Yeah.
for those who aren't. That's not their
Yeah.
approach. And so making sure that we are attentive to understanding how do we navigate and show up differently. You know?
Yeah, and that's such a good thing because you wonder what these conversations would have been differently had we not been in a pandemic.
I think it created new
Honestly,
muscle
and
Yep.
you know that it was companies were grasping with ways to acknowledge the hurt and how their employees, but it wasn't in person, I mean, it was we're in the midst of a pandemic. So you just wonder what those conversations would have been, how they would have been different, and if our dialogue would have been different and even more exhausting in a way,
Mhm.
right?
Because what happened last year wasn't new.
Right.
I mean, I had to be honest with people when people are like, "Did you see the news?" I'm like,
Uh-huh.
it's
Yeah,
just a new
Yes, but
day.
it was the perfect storm to break down all
Yes.
of
Yeah,
It
it was the
was.
Band-Aid to just push so much further and
Yes.
faster because you had to.
And we showed we could do it.
Yeah,
Think about the innovation that came out of last
that's what
year.
I'm saying, yeah.
The agility, so I don't want to go back.
No.
Or just have the option for flex, right? Like, are there core hours and you just have to be on and available through these core hours, and then you get your work done however you need to outside of those,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There has to be different innovative ways that are meeting, again, people where they are versus everyone goes back or everyone stays home. It can't be one size fits all.
Yeah. What else do you think should we progress toward in 2021? Like, what should be, any of you guys have a determination for this year?
Like a choice word that will lead my actions, or
You're such a coach. Sure, let's do it like that.
What do you mean? Can you operationalize this for me?
here's a chart. No, but I think, whenever I think about where I choose to get involved in my community work, my nonprofit work, it always revolves around three different things.
Okay.
Access, advocacy, and education,
Mhm.
right? So whatever I choose to spend my time on, and it could look disparate, like UPAF to Stellar Collegiate to the
Mhm.
regional transit to what have you, but it allows opportunity for access and educating others and creating advocacy for those that may not have it, for those that are underserved or underrepresented. And so for me, it's always to continue to act with intention. And that allows, being present with my time, being intentional with my choice of words or how I show up or how I want to just learn from everything that's happened in this last year. I would say it's just acting continuously more so with intention and how I choose to show up differently for myself and my family and my friends.
Yeah.
I think you said it earlier, and Joanne, you've said it, but being purposeful, and just remaining purposeful. Like I, as an individual, but also how we're engaging and with our members, but also having actionable items with purpose. And we can have all this dialogue, but until we put those coffee connections together or have more platforms where we're, I don't want that to stop,
Those
and
walks in the park were awesome.
Yeah.
I did that
Yeah.
last week. That was great.
engagement, but doing it with intention, doing it with purpose, and continuing to do that, and not just, we're all talking Zoom fatigue, but once we get back in person, there's going to be some other fatigue, but we've got to keep doing, we've got to keep marching. So
We can't let our foot off the gas.
Yeah.
And I think that's why balance is so important. I don't know. I think I could have a job for a while doing diversity work. I don't know if I could do it for a while, but this work isn't going to end anytime soon.
No.
And so how do we encourage people to not let their foot off the gas? To not, if you get tired, take a pause, but get back in. Okay, go ahead, Advisor
No,
Jones.
that's it. That's it. I think that for me, it's just exchanging this being for living, that we're looking towards this day of understanding, a lifetime of understanding. How do we, inculcate this need that this is our lived experience, this is for a lifetime. You can't be perfect, you can't know all the things, but we give you grace. You give me grace, you give what you need, and be prepared to receive that. So we grow together, right? Always grow and never grow.
Yeah.
We're growing, we're learning, and we're creating spaces to live and not just be.
Yeah.
And so here we are, being,
Yep.
living,
Yep.
let's live together.
Yeah.
And I think
And
it's
recording this, so this is good. This is good.
And I was just gonna say, just to add to that, it's again giving yourself the space and the grace to again make some mistakes or take that moment for mental health, right? And not have that internal conflict of like, I need to be doing something, I need to be productive, right? Where the head is saying one thing and the heart is saying another. And it's finding that balance between the head and the
That's it.
heart,
Yeah.
and just sitting in your presence and letting that kind of self-criticism fall away
Yeah.
and just sit with my bowl of chica and my Marvel movie and just own it.
I feel Tika. I feel like when you're Tika.
I'm going out to dinner after this.
Yeah, right. What's next?
But yeah, it's just giving yourself some of that space and grace to allow it to happen and creating that for others to feel okay to move forward in that same space.
Yeah.
I think it's taking up space too. So the one huge thing that this year has unlocked for me is the permission to be bold about things that sometimes we kind of had to hide and, you know, have you considered this? You know,
Yeah, no.
like now I'm gonna talk about it and I'm gonna be really bold about it and I'll be respectful and I'll meet you where you are.
Yeah.
But me talking about it is not disrespectful, right? So I can take up some space and get a little bigger.
Yeah, I'm taking up more space.
I love
my
it.
shirt. Yeah.
But no, and I don't know, that feels authentic to me.
Yeah.
Like I get to say what's on my mind now and people kind of listen to it because I think the spotlight on what is going on, it has cleared a lot of that away. And again, I do not want to disrespect where someone else is. I've also learned that we're not all in the same spot.
Yeah.
But involving you in a conversation is not disrespectful. Like
No.
asking you to listen.
Right. And I think too, just to add to that is like, you don't ever want to dim your light just to make someone else feel better or to, you know, protect their feelings. I mean, there's a definite way to do it respectfully
Totally.
and considerately, but still being able to share your voice and feeling empowered that your voice has meaning and your voice has value. And it's like, everyone has a voice. It's just knowing how to use it effectively.
Right.
So that you can create influence. And if it's not always just your water to carry, but having others influence that for you and forward.
Yeah.
So that it's not just you alone, but others are involved in that going
That's
forward.
critical. And then creating space for others to shine.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
a lot of times, a lot of folks, we all get a lot of shine.
Mhm.
But then we know that there's these other
other
brilliant,
people
that are
wonderful,
ready for some
beautiful,
shine.
abundant
Bring that
minds
share.
Yep.
So sharing the shine.
Let's do that. How about we do this? How about we take the space and we want you to take the space? Hopefully that you felt the energy. Like I'm excited, like I almost don't want to cut off. But here's the thing. We talked about being bold. We talked about taking the space. We talked about offering the space, carrying the water. Now's the time for our group to do that. We are so excited. We're going to pass it off to Lydia. You know, it's something funny. I was thinking about creating safe spaces. My mother used to work for the Harford County Sheriff's Department, and part of her role was she trained crossing guards. She said the best crossing guards always had an eye, but yet they had a passion for the kids that they were caring after. So we've got some crossing guards in our breakout rooms who are creating safe space and going to navigate us through this next step. So Lydia, I hand it over to you in Studio B.
Well, thank you for passing it over, Erica Joy. So first, thank you. I want to just take quick time to thank everyone who will be leading our breakout rooms. And so we will be placing you all in rooms very shortly to have a safe space for conversations where we can talk about some of the things that the panel talked about today. What we want to make sure that you all know is that you can share as much or as little as you want in these breakout rooms. We want to make sure that you don't feel pressure to educate others, through revisiting your own trauma, but to share what you feel comfortable sharing, and to really talk about what's helping get you through resources and just how you are taking care of yourself. We just want this to be as transparent as possible, as open, and to just flow with the conversation. And then we'll come back together to kind of share some takeaways at the end. So we will get going to get into our breakout rooms.
you who I don't know, my name is Alia Berman, and I am a Tempo member. I'm excited to spend the last 15 to 20 minutes of this program with you. It's been a great program. And in my small breakout session here, we only got to the first of 2 questions, which I always consider to be a great discussion when you don't get through all of the questions because everybody's sharing really great things. So, but I just wanted to kind of open this up to the group to share what you've discussed. And there were 2 parts to the small breakouts. One was talking through how you preserve your energy levels and mental health, and staying feeling good and optimistic despite a lot of really emotionally difficult things that the country is grappling with today. So we spent all of our time talking mostly about that. But then the second part to that question was, how have you prioritized inclusion, both in your personal and professional life? So I'll quickly start, and I can share what our group talked about in terms of what we're doing to preserve our energy levels. And then I wanted to open it up to the group to share what you've discussed to either one of those questions. And I think our group all agreed that we have deliberately limited our intake of the news, and are trying to watch or pay attention to or read what we need to know, but then limiting it to that, because there are so many traumatic events and things happening right now, and so it's important to try to restore energy after work. We also talked a little bit about staying off of social media, and one of our small group participants said that she deleted social media off of her phone or on Facebook and isn't using it at all. I use it in a very, very limited capacity just to kind of see what friends are doing and some of the fun things that they're up to, but being very careful not to get sucked into any sort of like political or other challenging issues. For me, mainly because I do diversity, equity, and inclusion work, and I try to spend my time after work and on the weekends being intentional about what I what I'm reading and what I put into myself. We talked about reading books around how to be a better advocate and ally, books on spirituality. Brooke shared a book, I think it's called Miracle Morning. I'm not sure if that's the correct name of the book, but just, she said, talked about, some different routines that you can, do in the morning in order to preserve your energy and start the day off on a good foot. We talked about watching stand-up comedy on Netflix and having more reasons to laugh than we've had in the past. Spiritual poetry, journaling, acupuncture, and meditation. So those are some of the things that we discussed, and just wanted to open it up to the group to see if anybody else would be willing to share what you're doing to preserve your mental health, and if there are resources that you could share with the group.
So Alia, I can speak if you don't mind. I can kind of talk to both questions from the breakout. So overwhelmingly, every single person talked about yoga. Yoga has been kind of a go-to, but we did talk about just exercise in general, making sure that you're making time for it. Even if it's something as simple as making time to get outside and go for a walk. We also talked about listening to your body. It's hard to realize when you're not in a great mental place because we're so busy between careers and family. So when you feel that you can't breathe, taking a step back and focusing on what's causing this, but then also being aware of physical signs of stress, really listening to your body. And then finally talking about giving yourself grace, that we aren't perfect and we can't be everything to everyone, and setting boundaries. So if you're a leader, creating an environment where people feel empowered to set boundaries for themselves, but also to set the example as the leader and not to be secretive when you're setting boundaries, so that, again, you're modeling that behavior for the company and the culture that you're trying to create. And then touching on the second discussion topic, there was some discussion about prior to what started happening, inclusion kind of got away from some people, even simply as far as where they worked or where they live, like being maybe more remote and removed from it. But that last summer moved folks into taking action, partly, well, one, because of what was happening, two, seeing their community rally around the support of the civil unrest and not being okay with it. Also, taking that personal investment, what can folks do to learn? And then also pushing for organizations to invest in DEI work, such as working with a consultant. Also, even looking at companies that have focused on hiring full-time DEI staff in response to what has happened. And again, leading by example. So if there's, say, for example, book clubs, that leadership are leading that discussion, that they're reading, that they're involved, that they're, you know, is really setting that example of everyone, this being important to the organization, and that everyone should be doing this. Also, that this, for some folks, they talked about this spilling over beyond their professional life in terms of, you know, whether it's a consultant work or DEI work, that this has bled into their personal life, where now they feel empowered and don't shy away from conversations with friends and family when there's a topic that they're like, nope, this is wrong, and they're willing to call it out, whereas before they wouldn't have felt empowered to do so. And then also it's starting to spill into boards that people sit on, that they're in their community and their volunteerism, they're saying, hey, REI, DEI has to be important in every organization that this person, you know, that they're touching. So spilling it over to your volunteerism as well. And then finally, just the inspiration that someone said that they felt about people coming together to say enough, and that using a racial equity lens has become a part of everything that this employer does. So whatever decisions they're making, they're really trying to have intentionality around taking that equity lens. And that personally, they had the opportunity to attend Unlearning Racism through YWCA. So again, a lot of discussion about how to build that muscle, how to read, how to bring in consultants, how to just be better.
Thanks, Anna. That is all awesome. I did take that course, Unlearning Racism, at the YMCA. I was the last cohort before the shutdown in March, and it's an amazing course if you all get the opportunity to take it. Two things that you said that I think are so important are the setting boundaries for yourself. And, you know, I say this all the time at work, but, you know, people take their cues from their leaders. And so it's so important to model that and to be vocal about what you're doing, because people, you know, they will do exactly what their leaders do. And that's how you set the tone in the organization. And then second, you know, you said that people have felt empowered to speak up, whether it's with family members or whomever. I agree. And I think that that's liberating, you know, because that, I think it's a source of, you know, draining your energy when you're not able to speak your truth or to be honest about how you feel. And I think what we've gone through over the last year, you know, we feel as though we now have the ability to say what's important to us and to speak out about inequity. And I think more of us are more conversant about these things. So we can do that now. And I think that's incredibly important. Anybody else who's willing to share? Would love to hear from a few others.
I can speak up. We kind of skipped to the second question, and I love that someone in our group said that a diverse group of women, they just decided to start getting together and do life together. And I just love that, because that's how you learn about other groups. I mean, it's so easy for your circle to look so much like you. So to be intentional about bringing some other people into your inner circle that you ordinarily would never get together with. And she said the group is expanded and now everybody is also including their husbands. That is a wonderful, beautiful thing. And that's how inclusion starts.
I love that. I think like expanding your exposure to different groups is everything. And it's, you know, the way it's the fastest way and the truest way to change perceptions around any one group, is to spend time individually with different people. And I got this like meme and sort of and the quote from a friend yesterday that I'll read to you, and I thought it was really powerful. It says, "If you have a Black friend and you don't understand their pain right now, you don't have a Black friend. You simply know a Black person." And I would say that that's exactly the same for the Asian community. And I think over the last year, I've spent a lot of time really evaluating my friendships and in thinking through whether or not the people that I've called friends truly understand me, my background. And I don't know that there's a way for you to fully do that unless you understand some of the different lived experiences, that I've had. And I think a lot of other people could say, the same thing. So thanks for sharing that, Sasha. I think that's amazing. And that's what I love about our Tempo community is, I said this to my small group breakout session, but having a community of people who are like-minded and who are doing their best to grow personally and professionally and do better in their communities is everything. And it's a huge sense of pride for me to be a part of, this community that is so invested in this work. Anyone else? I'd love to hear a few other ideas.
Oh yeah, I'll report out for our breakout group. Just kind of building on the idea that both you and Sasha just shared is there was a comment about how grateful we are to have groups like Tempo and other companies that are creating space for dialogue. And going back to the panel discussion that we had just a little while ago, just modeling how to have these conversations. It was like watching a group of girlfriends have a conversation and, showing folks how to, kind of break the ice and talk about these really important things that can be a little bit uncomfortable to talk about, especially at first. Also, the candor with which Tempo is modeling those conversations is really appreciated. On the mental health side, our group talked a little bit about something that it was actually a twofer. Natalie shared that she has improved her mental health by replacing old routines with a new routine. And so she said she bought a happy light and started gratitude journaling for 10 minutes in the morning. And instead of commuting to the office, that's her new morning routine. And that's been really, really helpful for her. So I think all of us in her breakout have now purchased a happy light on its way to our house via Amazon for tomorrow morning.
Oh, I love that. I love getting book recommendations too. The whole gratitude journal, if all of the major spiritual leaders say that the way to enlightenment is through gratitude. So that's next on my list too, is to make sure that I start doing the gratitude journal. That's a great idea. Other things that you would that you could share out.
So I'll share a couple of the things that stood out from my group because I thought it was really great conversation around being bold. There was just a great example of, speaking up on social media. And I think that that's really important because we might get some anxiety sometimes, but around, speaking up or speaking out or being an active ally. But what I heard was that, in those moments where we kind of just step out and we're really bold, it actually releases some of that pressure that we've kind of put on ourselves. So I think just taking advantage of those moments, whether it's in a meeting or it is something, on social media, or it's a conversation, a direct conversation with a friend or a coworker, but being bold was something that we talked about a lot.
Love that. I also think that being bold and speaking honestly about something that matters to you helps you stay in line with your integrity as a person. And so I can see how that relieves a lot of pressure and makes you feel like you're more, in line with yourself and your values. It's great.
Yeah, I'll hop in here for our group just to reiterate that message. There was this, we spoke about just being unapologetic about who you are and keeping in mind that you never know who's watching you. You never know who's watching you and using you as a model and a pattern for how they lead and how they should show up. And so being unapologetic, as far as the rest of our dialogue, we took a bit of a different approach. And one of the sentiments that continue to show up and pop up in our dialogue was this sense of guilt, right? Like, hey, I don't have kids. So, why am I, stressed in the pandemic? I still have a job. I still have a home I come back to. I'm doing better last year than I've done any other year. And so what is there to complain about? And just reiterating that we all should know that our feelings and our emotions are valid, and reminding ourselves, particularly as women, to speak to yourself how you would speak to your sister or your friend. Oftentimes we're a lot harder on ourselves than we are anyone else, and we're giving everyone around us these motivational talks and reinforcing words and all of these great things, and we fail to do it for ourselves. And so just reminding ourselves that, and then just the idea that we've all learned a lot this past year, but recognizing that learning isn't momentary, it's a continuous life journey. I think Joanne said it in the panel discussion, and just recognizing that it doesn't stop after the pandemic, it didn't stop after 2020, and that we're on this continuous and consistent journey to learn and be better people.
All brilliant things. Thank you, Asiela. We can take one more.
I'll jump in. I think it may have been Joanna who said this too, but just meeting people where they are. And I come from a very homogenous background, and this past year has been really difficult for me, seeing some of the things that people are posting and reiterating. And I thought that that's why I loved your quote so much, because I thought that because they knew me, that they would feel different. And so recognizing that your own experiences don't always dictate the pace of others who may be at the very beginning of their journeys, and extending some grace and patience, as frustrating as that is, and it is, if we're being real, it's extremely frustrating. But just having that openness and patience and grace to allow people to just start their journey, because some people haven't. We had one group member who mentioned that they really haven't had these conversations, or a lot of these conversations yet. A lot of us have been having them every day. And so I think it's important to recognize that we're all at, different points in that journey, but that it's a very motivating and inspiring thing that we have spaces like Tempo to at least start the process and guide others and embrace others and support others as we all kind of deal with this reckoning.
Yeah, thank you so much, Stephanie. I think what you said is really true, that it can be hurtful, I think, to realize that people may not understand some of the experiences and pain that you might have experienced, but understanding that we all come from very different backgrounds and experiences, and are at different places in our journey. And when we realize that, I think we sometimes take it less personally. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Erica Joy, who I believe is going to close the session out. And I don't see her, but I don't know if she's on the phone here.
She's actually not on.
Oh, she's not?
No,
okay.
She's not.
Okay.
But I'm happy to close out. Thank you, Alia, and thank you to all of our breakout leaders for leading these discussions, and for everyone for just showing up and having these conversations. We continue to be really impressed and inspired by our Tempo members and emerging women leaders who are having these talks and bringing this to their lives outside of work and outside of Tempo. So thank you guys for being a part of that. Thank you to our panelists who were speaking earlier today. We were so excited to have them in person, and we can't wait to see all of you in person as well. So take care, and thank you guys again for showing up. We'll see you again.